I have collected more than 170 very unusual and interesting historical photos. Write in the comments, which photo did you like the most? Aurora Mardiganian survived the Armenian genocide, escaped sexual slavery, and reached New York City in 1917. Her memoir, Ravished Armenia, became a silent film that exposed the horrors she witnessed to audiences across America. In 2010, 77-year-old Mexican rancher Don Alejo Tamez refused to surrender his farm to the Los Zetas cartel. Fighting alone, he killed 4 gunmen and wounded 2 more before he was killed, becoming a national folk hero. In 1904, Upton Sinclair went undercover in Chicago, meatpacking plants, and saw child labor, diseased animals, and filthy processing floors. His investigation inspired The Jungle, whose shocking details helped drive major food inspection and safety laws in 1906. And in 1937, 24-year-old Charlie Johns paid preacher Walter Lamb $1 to marry 9-year-old Eunice Winstead. The shocking Tennessee wedding drew national outrage and helped push the state to raise its minimum marriage age to 16. In 1939, Hitler sent his physician Karl Brandt to examine a disabled infant after the child's father requested permission to kill him. The baby was given a lethal injection, and the case became a model for Action T4, the Nazi program that murdered thousands of disabled people. In 1994, 18-year-old Shailene Farrell told her younger sister she would be right back after buying iced tea. She drove toward the grocery store where she worked, but employees never saw her enter, and hours later, her mother's car was found outside, with Shailene missing. In 1891, Tennessee coal companies replaced paid miners with leased convicts, mostly black men jailed under Jim Crow laws and forced to work in chains. The miners fought back by burning prison stockades and freeing hundreds of prisoners. In 1915, Austro-Hungarian Jewish soldiers prayed at Jerusalem's Western Wall while serving in the Ottoman Allied Army. The rare photograph captures Jewish troops in uniform beside local worshippers during the First World War. On July 18, 1970, a South Vietnamese Huey dropped troops into the Mekong Delta, where canals and flooded fields made ground travel slow and dangerous. These helicopters could land soldiers in remote areas within seconds, but their low flights left them exposed to enemy fire. In 1979, 84-year-old communist founder Constantin Pirvulescu stunned Romania by publicly accusing Nicolae Ceausescu of putting his personality cult above the people. Expelled and isolated, he still outlived the dictatorship and watched Ceausescu fall 10 years later. On August 6, 1945, the Enola Gay dropped the little boy atomic bomb on Hiroshima, creating this towering mushroom cloud. The blast destroyed much of the city, and about 140,000 people had died from the explosion and its effects by the end of 1945. On August 6, 1944, powerful 3.7-inch anti-aircraft guns guarded an English seaside resort from German aircraft. Each weapon could fire a 28-pound shell more than 30,000 feet into the sky, turning the peaceful promenade into a deadly air defense battery. Captain Saburo Shimada, a veteran of the New Guinea campaign, trained in kendo with a prosthetic hand in Japan in 1944. His adapted grip secured the sword to his missing hand, allowing him to practice despite his severe war injury. In 1903, acrobat and contortionist Robert Burns became the giant spider in Victor Herbert's operetta Babes in Toyland. His twisted pose created a disturbingly lifelike human spider without modern special effects. In the 1970s, Wizard of Oz star Margaret Hamilton traded the Wicked Witch for Cora, the friendly shopkeeper in Maxwell House commercials. She served coffee with the brand's century-old slogan, "Good to the last drop." Anne Bancroft and Mel Brooks married on August 5, 1964, 3 years after meeting at a television rehearsal. Their marriage lasted 41 years, ending only with Bancroft's death in 2005. In July 1939, A black man and a white man talked together on a curb in Muskogee, Oklahoma. Their ordinary conversation was striking in a state where Jim Crow laws still enforced racial segregation. In 1937, museum worker Richburg Galliard modeled a bell rack once used by an Alabama enslaver to stop people from escaping. The iron frame rose above the wearer's head, catching on branches, while a bell revealed every movement. On August 6, 1926, Gertrude Ederle became the first woman to swim across the English Channel. She finished in 14 hours and 31 minutes, beating the fastest man's record by nearly 2 hours despite rough seas and storms. Frederick Douglass and his wife Helen Pitts posed at Niagara Falls in 1889. Their interracial marriage had caused national outrage 5 years earlier, but they remained together until his death. In 1909, Gladys Emery and Gunjiro Aoki were denied marriage licenses in California and Oregon because interracial marriage was illegal. They traveled to Seattle to marry, causing a national scandal, and later had 5 children. Faye Dunaway and Warren Beatty posed beside their getaway car on the set of Bonnie and Clyde in 1967. Beatty produced the film, which shocked audiences with its brutal final ambush and helped transform Hollywood cinema. In 1913, Estonian manure haulers Gustav, age 65, and Anton, age 68, smoked their pipes after hard farm work. Photographer Johannes Pesuka captured their torn clothes, bare feet, and horse-drawn cart in Puhajoy village. In the early 1900s, a lector read newspapers and novels aloud, while cigar workers rolled tobacco by hand. The workers often paid his wages themselves, turning the factory floor into a classroom for news, politics, and literature. Anne Bancroft and Mel Brooks at the Hollywood premiere of The Miracle Worker in 1962, just months before they married. Bancroft later pushed Brooks to take bold risks, helping him become a celebrated film director and songwriter. Moscow in 1995 was caught between 2 eras, with Soviet trucks, aging streets, and new private businesses appearing side by side. Armed guards patrol near the Moscow River as the Foreign Ministry Tower rises through the haze behind them. This rider belonged to the 9th United States Cavalry, one of the black regiments known as the Buffalo Soldiers. They fought Apache warriors, guarded settlers, and patrolled some of the most dangerous land in the American West. Under enemy fire, Soviet railway troops repair tracks destroyed by German forces on the Kharkov Axis in 1942. Photographer Efim Kopit captured the crew hauling rails into place while explosions rose beside them on the southwestern front. In January 1944, German soldiers of the 68th Army Corps trained against captured French Hotchkiss tank number 113 in the Balkans. Smoke and fire made the obsolete tank a realistic target for practicing deadly close-range attacks. These footprints were pressed into wet volcanic ash about 3,660,000 years ago by early human ancestors called Australopithecus afarensis. Mary Leakey's team discovered the 27-meter trail in Tanzania in 1978, providing direct proof that our ancestors walked upright long before they developed large brains. In 1953, German photojournalist Inga Schönthal posed in Cuba with Ernest Hemingway and a huge marlin aboard his boat, Pilar. Beside them was Gregorio Fuentes, Hemingway's longtime boat captain and one possible inspiration for The Old Man and the Sea. Born in 1869, John Dukes became a popular American sideshow performer despite having severely shortened limbs from an undiagnosed congenital condition. Audiences repeatedly requested his headline act, which combined comedy, music, and remarkably skilled dancing at dime museums across the United States. 2 brothers over 7 feet tall became a sensation at the Delhi Durbar in 1903, where American photographer James Ricalton captured them beside himself. Their photographs became famous worldwide, yet their real names were never recorded. Stefan Bibrowski was born in Poland in 1890 with hypertrichosis, which covered his face and body in thick hair. Known on stage as Lionel the Lion-Faced Man, he spoke 5 languages and became a famous performer across Europe and America. This 1969 photograph shows an Asaro mudman wearing a huge clay mask in Papua New Guinea. The Asaro covered their bodies in pale mud and used terrifying masks to make rival warriors believe they were ghosts. In 1933, unemployed men in Amsterdam lined up to receive government aid as the Great Depression devastated jobs across the capitalist world. The Dutch economy would not fully recover until the outbreak of the Second World War. In 1990, William Ward's MiG-17 scraped its tail on the ground while pulling out of a loop at an air show in Arkansas. He calmly circled, lowered the landing gear, and landed safely, with inspectors finding no damage beyond scraped paint. A Prague street cleaner operates an early motorized sweeper in 1920 when the new Czechoslovak capital was modernizing its historic streets. Some cleaning jobs were later taken by penniless Russian refugees, including former officers forced into manual labor. Spring has arrived, and so have the rooks. In 1920, aviation cadet Ivanov from the Gatchina Flying School accidentally landed his Newport 21 in the treetops near Gzhatsk, Russia. On October 3, 1928, United States Customs officers searched 4 Chinese crewmen aboard the President Harrison at Pier 9 in Jersey City. They were accused of smuggling opium worth $1.5 million, equal to more than $27 million today. In 1932, photographer Nicolae Ionescu captured a disabled First World War veteran begging outside Domnița Bălașa Church in Bucharest. Beside him stood a framed portrait of Romania's royal couple and a written appeal for donations. In July 1941, a captured German Junkers 88 was displayed in central Moscow to prove that Hitler's feared aircraft were not invincible. The reconnaissance plane had landed behind Soviet lines, but the fate of its missing crew remains unknown. In 1942, a peasant woman searches for household items in the ruins of her home after German troops burned the village of Jurkino. The destruction occurred near Rzhev, where brutal fighting and occupation devastated hundreds of communities. National Geographic photographer Dean Conger traveled through all 15 Soviet republics, documenting everyday life while carefully avoiding politics. In 1974, he captured this welder joining a massive oil pipeline built to carry crude across the frozen Soviet wilderness toward Europe. Small Boy was a 1.65 kiloton surface nuclear test detonated at the Nevada test site on July 14, 1962. Its purpose was to reveal how a nuclear blast and electromagnetic pulse could damage hardened missile silos. Before the Statue of Liberty reached New York, workers built its enormous torch and arm in Paris in 1876. The hand alone was taller than the men beside it, revealing the true scale of a monument that had not yet been assembled. In 1942, Charles Jackson French tied a rope around his waist and swam for up to 8 hours through shark-filled waters, towing 15 wounded sailors from their sinking ship. Recommended for the Navy Cross, he received only a letter of praise and waited until 2022 for a posthumous medal. This Soviet Typhoon-class submarine was photographed under construction in Severodvinsk in 1980. At 175 meters long, it became the largest submarine ever built and could carry 20 nuclear ballistic missiles beneath Arctic ice. In 1908, draft horses pulled an entire house through the streets of San Francisco. Before powerful trucks and cranes, workers raised buildings on wooden supports and moved them intact to new locations. In 1918, a soldier at Camp Kearney tested his gas mask by peeling onions. If the fumes made his eyes water, the mask was not sealed properly. First Lieutenant Alton House was killed in France on his 27th birthday, while leading scouts toward a roadblock that had already destroyed 3 tanks. His charge into enemy fire cost him his life, earned him the Silver Star, and is now honored by a monument near the site. In 1932, Boys climbed trees outside Wrigley Field to watch the Chicago Cubs without buying tickets. Some balanced dangerously high above the street, turning nearby branches into the cheapest seats in baseball. A woman cuts her birthday cake in Iran in 1973, wearing a short patterned outfit just 5 years before the Islamic Revolution. After 1979, strict dress laws transformed what Iranian women could legally wear in public. A British Army chaplain prays over a dying German medic near Épinay, France, on September 18, 1918. The medic had been captured while treating wounded soldiers during the final weeks of the First World War. In 1934, the French Army's 121st Transport Squadron lined up hundreds of trucks, cars, and motorcycles at La Salle Barracks in Lourdes. These logistics units moved soldiers, weapons, and supplies, making their vehicles essential to every military operation. Jackie Chan sings at the Concert for Democracy in China in Hong Kong in 1989, raising money for the Tiananmen Square protesters. The image is striking because Chan later became a vocal supporter of the Chinese government. An insurgent patrol crosses the ruins of Jasna Street during the Warsaw Uprising in August 1944. Photographer Sylvester Braun, known as Chris, risked his life documenting the battle and created thousands of images before escaping the destroyed city. On February 11, 1911, Carrie and Beale cooked together inside Beale's cottage at Stony Lake, Canada. They prepared food in frying pans on a wood-burning stove, surrounded by oil lamps, rough timber walls, and simple kitchen tools. On August 6, 1944, Major George Preddy shot down 6 German Messerschmitt fighters in a single mission over France. The feat made the United States Army Air Force's pilot an ace in one day and helped establish him as the top Mustang ace in Europe. In 1946, a miner's wife prepares a freshly killed chicken on the back porch of her company-owned home in Jefferson County, Alabama. Her family's housing was tied directly to the coal company that employed her husband. In 1870, photographer Henry Béchard captured Nubian hunters restraining a massive Nile crocodile on an Egyptian riverbank. Using only ropes and teamwork, they controlled an animal powerful enough to drag a person underwater. A Chinese policeman patrols flooded Tianjin by boat in 1919. American photographer Sidney David Gamble captured this rare view while documenting everyday life in China. In April 1926, Newcomb College students practiced swimming and diving as part of their official studies in New Orleans. The Women's College was named after Sophie Newcomb, whose mother donated $3 million to Tulane University in her memory. In 1926, Roma families searched a vast Bucharest dump known as the Valley of Tears for anything they could sell or reuse. Adults and children picked through the waste together, turning discarded objects into tools, fuel, and income. Exhausted Red Army soldiers sleep inside a battered Willys Jeep in liberated Prague in May 1945. Soviet troops entered the city on May 9th after Czech resistance fighters had forced most German units to retreat or surrender. In 1946, the Baker atomic test exploded beneath Bikini Atoll, blasting a massive column of radioactive seawater over a fleet of target ships. The surge lifted the 27,000-ton battleship Arkansas and helped sink 8 vessels, while contaminating many others. On August 10, 1977, bulldozers destroyed Motterdam, an illegal settlement near Cape Town where thousands of black South Africans lived in tin shacks. Furious residents burned about 200 huts, while one man carried an oil drum through the ruins of his former home. Young women face life inside a Soviet corrective labor colony in 1989 under constant guard and strict discipline. Photographer Anatoly Iolis captured their tense reality just 2 years before the Soviet Union collapsed. Henry W. Baugh repeatedly entered the wreckage at Pearl Harbor, searching flooded ships for trapped sailors and recovering the dead. He later served in 3 wars, but his most dangerous mission began beneath the burning harbor. Taken in Paris in 1856, this is one of the earliest photographs ever made of a major flood. Several of France's largest rivers rose at once, causing one of the country's worst natural disasters. In 1913, each St. Petersburg resident ate about 200 kilograms of bread a year, with rye consumed 3 times more than wheat. Some bakeries used 25 flour sacks daily, while weak inspections allowed dirty conditions, stale loaves reheated for sale, and chemicals added to improve texture and acidity. Canadian Army Medical Corps nurses paused for tea in France on July 17, 1944, just 6 weeks after D-Day. These women held officer rank and treated wounded soldiers in field hospitals dangerously close to the fighting. Afghan boys, men, and women, some walking barefoot, shop in a crowded Kabul market in May 1964. The photograph captures everyday life just 9 years before Afghanistan's monarchy collapsed, beginning decades of coups, invasion, and war. On Christmas Eve in 1920, Londoners played an early football match on a muddy field in Nunhead, South London. They wanted to enjoy the game before evening family celebrations, as England slowly recovered from the First World War. Mexican peasant women and a barefoot child pose in a remote village in 1927. The photograph captures rural poverty after the Mexican Revolution, when most countryside families still had little access to schools, doctors, or basic services. A German officer sunbathes on a truck as a train carries military vehicles toward the Eastern Front in the Soviet Union in 1942. Rail transport saved fuel and protected the trucks from mechanical wear before they entered combat zones. These photographs show Japanese military police captain Kiyoshi Matsumoto being taken to his execution in Nanjing on June 11, 1947. Convicted of torturing and murdering Chinese civilians and prisoners in Jiashan County, he was sentenced to death by a Chinese military tribunal. In November 1972, the Chinese ship Wang Chun ran aground during a violent storm near Bochum in North Holland. Every crew member was rescued before the waves rolled the stranded ship onto its side. In 1911, British prison officers force-fed a suffragette who went on hunger strike after being jailed for demanding voting rights. A tube was pushed through her nose or mouth, a brutal practice that caused injuries and turned imprisoned women into powerful symbols of resistance. In January 1942, Nazi newspapers promised Ukrainians good pay, hot meals, and comfortable housing to recruit workers for Germany. This medical examination shows women who answered the call before millions of Eastern Europeans were trapped in forced labor under brutal conditions. On August 29, 1949, the Soviet Union secretly detonated its first atomic bomb at the Semipalatinsk test site in Kazakhstan. The successful test shocked the West, ended the American nuclear monopoly, and began a far more dangerous phase of the Cold War. In 1917, French women made lifelike papier-mâché heads for soldiers fighting in the trenches. Troops raised them above the parapet to draw enemy fire, revealing hidden snipers without risking a real soldier's life. A cheerful gentleman poses with a drink beside a homemade rural toilet in the United States in 1921. Its hand-painted sign boldly advertises separate doors for ladies and men, a rare luxury before indoor plumbing reached many American homes. German Panzer I tanks cross a river during military exercises in Thuringia on November 10, 1939. Built mainly for training and armed with only 2 machine guns, these lightly armored vehicles were still sent into frontline combat during the Second World War. On June 12, 1943, 4 Avenger aircraft from USS Bogue caught the German submarine U-118 on the surface and attacked it. This photograph captures a depth charge falling beside the conning tower moments before the submarine exploded, leaving only 17 survivors. In May 1917, soldiers and officers surrendered gold and silver medals to Petrograd Soviet to fund the revolution. That same year, precious St. George crosses were replaced with cheap metal versions stamped yellow metal or white metal. German bombing devastated this part of Smolensk on June 29, 1941, leaving entire blocks around Komuni and Malaya Universitetskaya streets in ruins. In the distance, the Cathedral of the Assumption survived the destruction that erased much of the city below. A German soldier grins in an Eastern Front trench in 1943 while holding a Gewehr 43 rifle. Its 10-round magazine and semi-automatic action gave him far faster follow-up shots than the standard bolt-action Karabiner 98K. On May 13, 1981, Mehmet Ali Agca shot Pope John Paul II as he rode through St. Peter's Square, striking him in the abdomen and hand. This photograph captures Agca raising his pistol moments before the attack, hidden among the crowd. London, 1986. A crane's steel wrecking ball tears through an old building on Long Acre in Covent Garden. High above the rubble, two workers finish the demolition with sledgehammers, without helmets, harnesses, or visible safety lines. In 1912, workers unloaded bananas after United Fruit's refrigerated ships helped cut American prices 40-fold. Behind the cheap fruit, rival Samuel Zemurray backed an armed coup in Honduras, overthrew President Miguel Davila, and secured vast banana lands through the new government. In August 1916, a French soldier in Champagne aimed a level rifle through Alfred Belliard's metal frame and mirror periscope. The device let him fire from behind the trench wall, keeping his head below enemy sniper fire. A young couple embraces beside a barbed wire barricade on the Seine in Paris during the liberation of 1944. Robert Doisneau captured this intimate moment while deadly street fighting was still transforming the city. An Ossetian woman carries an assault rifle during the South Ossetian War in 1991, when the collapse of the Soviet Union ignited a brutal fight for control. The war ended in June 1992 with a ceasefire and joint peacekeeping forces. In 1935, a woman displayed a replica of an extraordinary folding knife created by Franz Frenzel in the early 20th century. The bizarre device packed dozens of blades and tools into one massive handle. A German sentry watches smoke rise from a bridge over the Dnieper after Nazi forces captured Kiev in September 1941. The city would endure more than 2 years of occupation, mass executions, and the murder of tens of thousands at Babin Yar. American soldiers inspect the shell exit hole in a Sherman tank after its armor was pierced in 1944. The scattered gear shows how quickly the crew had to abandon the damaged vehicle. A flying fortress of the 384th Bomb Group drops its bombs over Berlin on March 22, 1944. The photograph was taken through the ball turret of another bomber, while both aircraft were flying deep inside enemy territory. Members of Korea's Jongmi Righteous Army pose with rifles in 1907. The force grew after Japan dissolved the Korean military, driving former soldiers to join civilian fighters in a desperate armed resistance. American soldiers crouched near an atomic blast at the Nevada Proving Ground in 1957. These exercises placed troops close to nuclear explosions to test how soldiers and military equipment would survive an atomic battlefield. In 1923, this farmer listened to the radio through headphones while working beside his cow. Early radio signals were often too weak for speakers, so private headphone listening brought news and entertainment directly into the barn. On July 8, 1975, 6-foot Joe Theismann looked like a child in the arms of 7'4" Andre the Giant. The legendary wrestler weighed more than 500 pounds, nearly 3 times as much as the star quarterback. In 1990, rival gun designers Eugene Stoner and Mikhail Kalashnikov met in Washington, District of Columbia, and held each other's famous rifles. Stoner created the AR-15, while Kalashnikov designed the AK-47, 2 weapons that armed opposing sides across the world. In 1968, a helicopter carried a Futuro house over Finland to its installation site. Architect Mari Surinen designed this lightweight fiberglass home so it could reach remote locations by air. Algiers, 1920. A colonial soldier passes a veiled Algerian woman while a European couple walks beside them. The photograph captures how French rule forced radically different cultures to share the same streets. Fidel Castro and his rebels in the Sierra Maestra Mountains in 1957. From these hidden camps, they fought Batista's army and built the revolution that seized Cuba just 2 years later. Future President George H.W. Bush flew as a United States Navy pilot in 1944. That year, enemy fire destroyed his plane over the Pacific, but a submarine rescued him while his 2 crewmates were lost. This aerial view from the 1930s shows the Oca oil field, the birthplace of Sakhalin's oil industry. Its dense forest of wooden derricks reveals how intensely crude oil was extracted from this remote northern landscape. In the 1960s, engineers cut the ancient Abu Simbel temples into more than 1,000 massive blocks. They rebuilt them 65 meters higher, saving the monuments from the rising waters of the Aswan Dam. Japanese sailors performed morning exercises aboard the battleship Yamashiro in the late 1930s. The ship was sunk with most of its crew during the Battle of Surigao Strait in 1944. In 1924, the Soviet Union secretly bought Model 1921 Thompson submachine guns through Mexico. They were issued to secret police and border troops who used these American weapons against armed smugglers and anti-Soviet fighters. A Korean family flees the Japanese army during the Russo-Japanese War in 1904, carrying everything they could save. Japan soon tightened its control over Korea, turning wartime occupation into full annexation just 6 years later. Villagers collect frozen potatoes at the Demian Bedny Collective Farm in Udachna, Donetsk region in 1933. During the Holodomor, Soviet authorities seized food from Ukrainian villages while millions faced starvation. A Maori guard speaks with a Japanese prisoner at New Zealand's Featherston camp during the Second World War. In 1943, a violent clash there killed 48 Japanese prisoners and 1 guard. After the battleship Maine exploded in Havana Harbor in 1898, men crowded this old guard recruiting station to join the coming war with Spain. The blast killed 266 American sailors, but no proof ever showed that Spain caused it. In 1810, Shaker weaver Tabitha Babbitt reportedly invented a circular saw after watching men waste effort with a pit saw that cut only one way. She never patented it, and historians still debate the story because no original saw or clear record of her invention survives. In 1937, Berber collaborators in Italian Libya presented Mussolini with this ceremonial sword, crafted by Picchiani and Barlacchi. The weapon vanished after July 1943 when Italian resistance fighters looted and destroyed his residence, Rocca delle Camminate. Hoover Dam high scalers hung from ropes and drilled into the canyon walls with heavy jackhammers. They removed loose rock and planted dynamite while working hundreds of feet above the Colorado River. This is the shattered Führer bunker complex in Berlin, where Adolf Hitler died in April 1945. Soviet forces later blasted the concrete ruins to stop the site from becoming a Nazi shrine. This Soviet OT-34 flamethrower tank was reportedly knocked out from the air in Latvia by famous German pilot Hans Ulrich Rudel in August 1944. Its deadly flamethrower replaced the Hull machine gun and could blast burning fuel roughly 100 meters. German, Italian, and Romanian prisoners of war crowded together in Stalingrad in 1943. Many Axis troops captured after the surrender were already starving, frostbitten, or sick, and only a fraction survived Soviet captivity. In 1936, Soviet mining celebrity Alexei Stakhanov received this car as a personal gift from Joseph Stalin. The former manual laborer suddenly had privileges ordinary workers could only dream of, making him a powerful symbol of Soviet propaganda. In 1943, Herman the Cat received an official Coast Guard identification card, naming him an expert mouser at the Port of Baltimore. His credential even carried paw prints as his signature. In 1968, Yugoslav soldier Daliborka Stojcic posed beside a military jet before representing her country at Miss Universe. She reached the semi-final, placing among the top 15 contestants. In 1869, Constantinople's firemen raced through the streets on foot, carrying a heavy hand-pumped fire engine on their shoulders. Rival crews sometimes fought each other for the right to tackle the blaze, even while an entire neighborhood burned. In 1916, prisoners of war in Casablanca slept in rows of tightly packed beds beneath uniforms and personal belongings hung from the walls. The cramped dormitory offered almost no privacy, while every prisoner stored his entire daily life beside his bed. Around 1941, future Pope John Paul II worked in a limestone quarry near German-occupied Krakow. The brutal job protected Karol Wojtyła from deportation and secretly prepared him for the priesthood. In 1912, a French contest challenged inventors to achieve flight using only human muscle power. This bicycle-powered machine shows how early pioneers tested wings, pedals, and raw strength before lightweight aircraft became practical. During construction in the 1930s, derricks pulled thousands of steel wires across the Golden Gate to form the bridge's massive main cables. Each cable contains 27,572 individual wires, tightly compressed into a bundle nearly 1 meter wide. This Boeing B-17 Flying Fortress returned to Algeria after a German fighter sliced almost completely through its tail over Tunisia in 1943. Despite the massive damage, the crew kept the bomber airborne and landed safely. German veteran Hans Lange holds a portrait of himself at 19 in 1918. A grenade wound slowly robbed him of his sight, and this photograph was taken in 1998, 1 year before his death. During the First World War, this French soldier tested an Adrian steel breastplate and portable shield designed to stop shrapnel in the trenches. The heavy armor offered limited protection, but it was too awkward for fast movement and never became standard equipment. Fans gather around a poster for Rocky Marciano versus Joe Louis in 1951. Marciano hated fighting the aging Louis, his childhood hero, but the painful victory pushed him toward the heavyweight championship 1 year later. Arnold Schwarzenegger stands on stage at the 1974 Mr. Olympia in New York City. He defeated Lou Ferrigno to claim his 5th straight title, then shocked fans by announcing his retirement 1 year later. This prison photograph shows Sue Logue, the first woman executed in South Carolina's electric chair in 1943. A dispute over a calf grew into a feud that killed 8 people, and Logue was convicted of arranging the revenge murder of the farmer who killed her husband. French colonial soldiers are held at Stalag 1B Hohenstein after Germany's victory over France. Black prisoners faced racist abuse, forced labor, and harsher treatment than many white captives, while thousands of captured African troops were murdered before ever reaching a camp. On October 4, 1956, Britain detonated the first operational Blue Danube nuclear bomb at Maralinga, Australia, with a yield of 1.5 kilotons. The blast carved a crater 50 meters wide and 12 meters deep, later used to bury radioactive soil. In Canada in 1920, a precast concrete pipe inventor proved his design could survive more than 21 tons of weight. Workers stacked hundreds of heavy sandbags above it, while one man sat safely inside. Mafia boss turned informant Tommaso Buscetta testified at New York's Pizza Connection trial in 1986. His evidence exposed how Sicilian mobsters used pizza restaurants to distribute heroin, helping convict 18 defendants. Donald Campbell's Bluebird CN-7 lies wrecked after crashing at nearly 360 miles per hour in 1960. Campbell survived a fractured skull, rebuilt the car, and set a land speed record of 403 miles per hour in 1964. On April 7, 1945, American carrier aircraft struck the Japanese battleship Yamato with multiple bombs and torpedoes north of Okinawa. As the ship capsized, A forward magazine exploded in this massive blast, killing about 3,055 of its 3,332 crewmen. A Marine fires from a shell hole while hunting a Japanese sniper on Tarawa in November 1943. The island was so heavily defended that more than 1,000 United States Marines were killed during just 76 hours of fighting. This photograph from 1904 shows a woman wearing a costume that looks remarkably like Batgirl. The resemblance is startling because the comic book heroine did not appear until 1961, exactly 57 years later. A French soldier guards two Algerian prisoners tied together by a rope during the brutal colonial war. France ruled Algeria for 132 years, and the fight for independence left hundreds of thousands dead before Algerian freedom came in 1962. Philippe de Gaulle, son of Free France leader Charles de Gaulle, reads military orders in Normandy in 1944 while serving with the 2nd Armored Division. Weeks later, he helped liberate Paris and forced German troops inside the National Assembly to surrender. In 1940, Adolf Hitler returned to the trenches near Fromelles, France, where he had served as a German soldier during the First World War. 22 years after Germany's defeat, he revisited the battlefield as the dictator whose army had just conquered France. This box of German steel hand granite stick grenades was dug up in Ukraine, still packed almost exactly as troops received it during the Second World War. Each hollow wooden handle hit a pull cord that activated the grenade's fuse. On April 20, 1945, German pilot Edward Schallmoser accidentally rammed an American Martin B-26 bomber with his Messerschmitt 262 over Germany. He escaped by parachute and landed in his parents' garden, directly in front of his stunned mother. This rare photograph shows German soldiers armed with MP-40 submachine guns sheltering inside a shell crater during the Battle of Stalingrad in 1942. Another famous image appears to show the same position from a different angle, revealing a scene hidden for decades. In 1948, Rosa Lee Ingram and her teenage sons were sentenced to Georgia's electric chair after a white landowner was killed during a violent confrontation. Their claim of self-defense sparked international outrage, and their death sentences were later reduced to life in prison. Write in the comments, which photo did you like the most?